The Bennett family Christmas dinner was always a performance of wealth and status. This year, they'd chosen my cousin Victoria's modest penthouse, all 6,000 square feet of Italian marble and Central Park views. Alexandra, darling. Aunt Patricia air-kissed my cheek, Cartier bangles jingling. Still in that charming little studio apartment? I adjusted my carefully chosen outfit, simple sweater, worn jeans, scuffed boots. Let them think I couldn't afford better. Yes, Aunt Patricia, still there. How persistent of you. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. Victoria, dear. Look who's finally arrived. Victoria glided over in channel, perfect highlights catching the light from her crystal chandeliers. Cousin, we were just discussing real estate investments. But oh, she patted my arm condescendingly. You're still renting, aren't you? I thought about my real apartment, the entire top floor of my building, with its private elevator and rooftop garden. But instead, I just smiled. Yes, still in the studio. At least it's in Murray Hill. My other cousin Marcus chimed in, swirling his aged scotch. Though barely. What's the rent in that neighborhood now? $2,000 a month. $2,200. I replied, letting them assume it was a stretch for me. In reality, the monthly rental income from my building's other units was well into six figures. You know, Victoria's husband James leaned in, reeking of expensive cologne and bad decisions. I have some excellent investment properties available. Small units, perfect for someone of your means. I knew about James's investment properties, over-leveraged buildings with multiple violations, bought with borrowed money and questionable loans. I also knew about the foreclosure notices his company had received last week. That's so kind, I murmured, accepting a glass of wine that probably cost less than the cufflinks I'd left at home. Speaking of property, Uncle Richard boomed from his position by the fireplace. Did you all hear about the Morrison building sale? Entire block, prime location. Some mysterious buyer swooped in, paid cash. I sipped my wine to hide my smile. The Morrison building had been my latest acquisition, through a shell company, of course, along with the 6 other properties on that block. Must be nice. Marcus's wife Sarah sighed, adjusting her designer dress. We tried to get a unit there, but they're not selling anymore. Just leasing at ridiculous rates. Pathetic studio apartments going for luxury prices, James scoffed. Speaking of which, Alexandra, how do you even afford your rent? Still doing that. What was it? Consulting? Something like that, I replied vaguely, thinking of my real office. 40 stories up, overlooking the empire I'd built while they weren't looking. You know, Victoria said loudly enough for everyone to hear. We have an entry-level position opening in our leasing office. Perfect for someone who needs to understand real estate from the ground up. The room tittered. I checked my phone discreetly. Right on schedule. My property management company was sending out the New Year's lease renewals, including to everyone in this room. Still can't believe you're renting that pathetic studio. Marcus laughed, now on his 3rd scotch. At your age, you should own something, anything. Everyone joined in the laughter. The perfect moment. Funny you should mention ownership, I said quietly, pulling out my phone. I've been meaning to discuss the upcoming changes to your buildings. The laughter stuttered to a stop. My building? Victoria frowned. What are you talking about? I pulled up the Property Records app, projecting it onto their smart TV with a quick tap. See, I don't just rent that studio apartment. I own the building, along with this one, and most of the others on this block. The room went silent as I scrolled through property deed after property deed, each showing the same owner, Alexander Bennett Holdings, LLC. That's impossible, James stammered, recognizing his own building's address. These properties are owned by Summit Development Group, a subsidiary of Alexander Bennett Holdings, I confirmed, enjoying his rapidly paling face, along with Premier Properties, Elite Management, and 6 other companies you've been trying to compete with. Victoria's wine glass slipped from her fingers, staining her imported rug. But you live in a studio, a convenient office actually, for meeting with potential acquisitions, I smiled. Like the Morrison building Uncle Richard mentioned. Though I prefer to keep my purchases quiet. Quiet? Marcus choked. How many buildings do you own? I pulled up another screen. In Manhattan? 27. Plus some commercial properties, development sites. I paused. Oh, and as of last week, the majority stake in James's failing company. James collapsed into a chair. The foreclosure notices. Were from my bank, I confirmed. Don't worry, I'll be restructuring things, starting with the management team. The silence was deafening. Aunt Patricia clutched her pearls. Uncle Richard's Scotch glass froze halfway to his lips. Victoria looked like she might faint. But you're just... Sarah struggled to comprehend. The poor cousin in the pathetic studio? I stood, straightening my simple sweater. Amazing what you can build while people underestimate you. My phone buzzed. The lease renewals had been sent. Right on cue, their phones started chiming. You should read those carefully, I advised, gathering my things. The new terms are quite different, especially the rent increases. I headed for the door, then turned back. Oh, and Victoria? About that entry-level position in your leasing office? I don't think you'll be doing much hiring anymore. The new owner has other plans. The elevator doors closed on their stunned faces, and I smiled. Merry Christmas indeed. The next 48 hours played out exactly as I'd predicted. My phone filled with increasingly desperate messages from family members suddenly discovering their true landlord. Victoria, there must be some mistake about the 40% rent increase. Marcus, about that comment regarding your studio. James, please, let's discuss the company takeover. I reviewed them from my actual apartment, the 5,000 square foot penthouse hidden behind that pathetic studio facade. Maya, my chief of operations, sat across from me, updating on the fallout. James tried to access his company accounts this morning, she reported. All frozen as per acquisition protocol. And Victoria called 3 different real estate attorneys. They all declined to represent her after checking ownership records. Maya smiled. Apparently, no one wants to challenge Alexander Bennett Holdings. I walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows, surveying my properties dotting the Manhattan skyline. The lease renewals? Going out as planned. Market rate adjustments for all units. She checked her tablet. Interesting how your family all managed to get below-market deals through James's company. Nepotism has its privileges, I mused. Until now. My phone buzzed. Uncle Richard requesting an urgent meeting. The family patriarch finally realizing his empire was built on rented ground. Should I decline? Maya asked. No. Set it for tomorrow. My office. I turned from the window. The real office. Speaking of which, Maya pulled up another report. James is in the lobby of their building now, trying to convince the management team he's still in charge. I switched on the security feed. James, his expensive suit wrinkled from sleeping in his office, gesturing wildly at staff, who'd already received their new ownership notices. "Send in the transition team," I instructed. "It's time for James to learn what corporate takeover really means." The next morning, I arrived at my downtown office early. The real one, 40 stories up, with views of the city. I was reshaping one building at a time. I'd changed from my poor cousin costume to what I actually wore to run a billion-dollar real estate empire. Tom Ford suit, Louboutin heels, power and confidence in every detail. Uncle Richard arrived exactly on time, his usual commanding presence diminished by uncertainty. The receptionist let him past the Alexander Bennett Holdings sign he'd somehow never noticed before. "My God," he whispered, taking in the scope of my operation. Screens covered the walls, showing real-time data from properties across the city. A dozen analysts worked at state-of-the-art terminals, managing the empire I'd built in secret. "Different from my studio apartment?" I asked, not looking up from my monitors. "Alexandra, why didn't you tell us?" He sank into a chair, looking older than I'd ever seen him. "Tell you what?" I finally turned to face him. "That while you were all mocking my choices, I was buying up half of Manhattan? That your precious real estate advice was outdated 20 years ago? That James's successful company was hemorrhaging money and violating dozens of regulations? We didn't know." "You didn't look," I corrected, too busy feeling superior to notice what I was building. My phone buzzed. The transition team had arrived at James's office. On my screen, I watched him being escorted out, box of personal items in hand. "James is finished in real estate," Uncle Richard stated, following my gaze. James was finished years ago. He just didn't know it. I pulled up his company's financials. Over-leveraged properties, illegal subletting schemes, maintenance violations. "Did you really think I'd let that continue in my buildings?" "Your buildings," he repeated softly. "All this time." "Remember last Easter?" I asked. "When Victoria announced she was raising everyone's rent through James's company, called it smart business, while looking right at my tiny studio." He nodded slowly. "I bought her building the next day. Could have raised her rent then, but I waited, watched, learned who else was involved in their little schemes. And now everyone pays market rate. No more family discounts. No more special treatment." I stood, walking to my wall of windows. "Welcome to professional property management." "The family won't forget this," he warned. I turned back, smiling. "Uncle Richard, what makes you think I want forgiveness?" His phone chimed, probably the lease renewal for his own penthouse apartment. The one he'd bragged about getting through James at half market rate. "You should read that carefully," I advised. "The new terms are quite specific about occupancy requirements and subletting violations." He paled, and I knew I'd hit the mark. Another of James's illegal arrangements exposed. When did you become this?" I gestured to my empire. "I always was this. You all just never bothered to see past the studio apartment." Maya appeared at the door. "The transition team needs authorization for the next phase." I nodded. "Start with James's office. I want a full audit by end of week." I turned back to Uncle Richard. "You should go. Your lease renewal needs attention, and the deadline's quite firm." He stood shakily, the family patriarch finally understanding how power had shifted. "Oh, and Uncle Richard?" I called as he reached the door. "Merry Christmas. The rent increase is my gift to the family. Think of it as financial education. After he left, Maya brought in the latest acquisition reports. 3 more buildings under contract, 2 development sites pending, and 1 very expensive lesson being taught to my family of assumption and arrogance. A week after Christmas, I sat reviewing the changes my revelation had sparked. The family group chat had exploded with accusations and blame, particularly aimed at James for hiding my ownership from them, as if they'd ever asked. Maya entered with the morning briefing. Victoria's tried to list her penthouse for sale. Tried? I raised an eyebrow. Apparently, she forgot about the sublease clause, the one saying she needs landlord approval. Maya smiled. Your approval? I pulled up Victoria's lease on my screen, another of James's special arrangements. She'd been subletting half her penthouse as a luxury short-term rental, pocketing the difference. Send her the violation notice, I instructed, and schedule an inspection. I want every illegal modification documented. Already done. Oh, and Marcus called again. Something about his commercial lease? I smiled, remembering Marcus's smug comments about my consulting work. His investment firm occupied 3 floors in one of my downtown buildings, another sweetheart deal through James. Let me guess, he's worried about the new terms? More like panicking. The market rate adjustment would triple his rent. I switched to the security feed from Marcus's office. He was pacing, phone in hand, designer suit wrinkled from stress. On his desk, the new lease terms laid out exactly what his arrogance would cost him. Have our leasing team reach out, I said. Offer him the same deal we give everyone else. Market rate, no special treatment. My phone buzzed. Aunt Patricia requesting an emergency family meeting at her apartment. The same apartment she'd gotten through James's connections in one of my best buildings. Should I decline? Maya asked. No. I stood straightening my Armani blazer. I think it's time to explain how things really work now. The family had gathered in Aunt Patricia's lavishly decorated living room, paid for with money saved from years of below-market rent. Their faces showed various stages of panic and indignation. Alexandra, Aunt Patricia started, we've been discussing the situation. The situation where you've all been violating your leases? I interrupted, taking the power position by the window, or the situation where James's company facilitated tax evasion through illegal subletting schemes. Victoria gasped. Marcus loosened his tie nervously. We're family. Uncle Richard tried. Surely we can reach some arrangement. Like the arrangements that cost my company millions in lost revenue? I pulled out my tablet, projecting onto their smart TV. Let's review exactly what family has cost me. Spreadsheets filled the screen. Years of below-market rents, illegal sublets, unreported income, maintenance violations. Victoria's luxury sublets. I highlighted her row. Cost me $400,000 in lost revenue last year alone. Marcus' sweetheart commercial lease. Another $2 million under market. But James said. Victoria started. James committed fraud. I cut in. And you all happily participated while mocking my pathetic lifestyle. Uncle Richard stood, attempting his boardroom authority. Now see here. No, you see. I switched to the security footage from Christmas dinner. Their own voices filled the room, laughing about my studio apartment, offering entry-level jobs, dripping with condescension. I've watched you all for years, I continued as they squirmed. Breaking rules, cutting corners, feeling entitled to special treatment because of family. What do you want? Marcus finally asked, defeat in his voice. I want professional tenants who follow their leases. I want market rate rents and properly reported income. I stood. I want you all to learn that actions have consequences. And if we refuse, Victoria challenged weakly. I smiled. Check your emails. Their phones chimed simultaneously. I watched their faces as they read the formal notices from my legal team. Lease violations, subletting charges, tax reporting requirements. You're reporting us? Aunt Patricia whispered. I'm enforcing the law, I corrected. Something James forgot exists. This will ruin us, Marcus protested. No, I walked to the door. This will teach you how business really works. Welcome to professional property management. As I reached the elevator, Victoria called out. Wait, the entry-level position I offered. I didn't mean to insult me? I turned back. You did. You all did. For years. Now you can all learn what real estate management actually involves. Starting with following your leases. Back in my office, Maya brought in the latest reports. Victoria's illegal sublets are cleared out. Marcus is meeting with commercial realtors about alternate space. And James, how's the audit going? 3 more violations found this morning. The SEC might be interested in some of his creative accounting. I looked out over my city, watching the winter sun glint off buildings I'd quietly acquired while my family underestimated me. The quiet girl in the studio apartment had built an empire under their noses. Send them all new leases, I instructed. Standard terms, market rates, no exceptions. Even Uncle Richard? Especially Uncle Richard. I smiled. It's time the family learned how I really do business. My phone buzzed with another group chat notification. They were still arguing, still blaming, still not understanding that their world had fundamentally changed. But they would learn, one market rate lease at a time. 1 month after the Christmas revelation, I reviewed the transformation from my real penthouse office. Bloomberg's headline said it all. Alexandra Bennett, the stealth real estate queen who built a billion-dollar empire while her family wasn't looking. Maya entered with the morning briefing. Victoria's moved out of the penthouse, downsized to a 2-bedroom in Queens. Outside my portfolio, I noted. Smart of her. Marcus's firm is relocating to New Jersey. They couldn't match market rates in any prime Manhattan buildings. Maya checked her tablet. Apparently, other landlords saw our lease terms and adjusted their rates accordingly. I smiled, remembering Marcus's condescending comments about my consulting work. Now his prestigious investment firm operated from a strip mall in Paramus. And James, the SEC investigation is proceeding. They're very interested in his creative accounting methods. Maya paused. Your Uncle Richard is here. Says it's important. I checked the security feed. Uncle Richard waited in the lobby, looking diminished in last year's suit. No more custom tailoring or premium scotch. Amazing how paying market rate rent affected one's lifestyle. Sent him up. He entered differently than he had at Christmas. Humbled, cautious, finally understanding who held the real power. Alexandra, he started, then stopped, taking in my actual office. The wall of screens showing real-time data from my properties, the teams of analysts managing my empire, the view of Manhattan he'd never noticed was mine. Sit, I gestured to a chair. How's the new lease working out? He flinched. It's adjusting has been difficult. Like adjusting to finding out your struggling niece owns half of Manhattan. I deserve that, he admitted, surprising me. We all do. The way we treated you was exactly why I kept everything quiet. I finished. Why show your cards when people are so eager to underestimate you? My phone buzzed. Another property acquisition completed. My empire growing while my family shrank. The family's discussing bankruptcy, he said quietly. Victoria, Marcus, even Patricia. The market rates are what everyone else has always paid. I cut in. Welcome to real business, Uncle Richard. No more special treatment. That's actually why I'm here. He straightened slightly. To learn. I raised an eyebrow. Learn. You built all this while we mocked you. Acquired an empire while we bragged about trust funds and family connections. He met my eyes. Teach me how to do it right this time. I studied him, remembering all the family dinners where he'd lectured about proper business methods, all while running his company on nepotism and outdated practices. Why should I? Because you're better at this than any of us, he said simply. And because maybe it's time the family learned how real success works. I pressed a button, and the screens filled with my latest project. A revolutionary development combining residential, commercial, and sustainable technology. First lesson, I said. See those empty buildings on 47th Street? He nodded. Everyone ignored them because they looked worthless, like a studio apartment in Murray Hill. I smiled. I bought them for pennies on the dollar last year. The new development breaks ground next month. Understanding dawned on his face. While we were bragging about luxury penthouses, I was buying the future. I finished. Success isn't about showing off. It's about seeing value where others don't. Teach me, he repeated. I considered the possibilities. The arrogant uncle who dismissed me now asking to learn. The family that had mocked my choices now facing the consequences of their own. 3 conditions, I said finally. First, you start at the bottom. Learning operations, maintenance, real tenant management. He nodded. Second, everything's merit-based. No family privileges, no shortcuts, no special treatment. And third, you help teach the others. I stood, walking to my wall of windows. If they want to learn, really learn, I'll show them. But they start at the beginning, just like I did. They might not all agree, he warned. Then they can keep paying market rate. I shrugged. Their choice. My phone buzzed again. Victoria requesting a meeting. Then Marcus. Then Aunt Patricia. Word spreading that there might be a path forward. Send them all the same message. I told Maya. Orientation starts Monday, 8 a.m., in my studio apartment. Uncle Richard smiled slightly. The studio that's actually your operations office. Amazing what people don't see when they're too busy looking down, I replied. After he left, Maya brought in the latest market reports. My property's values had doubled since the Christmas revelation. Turns out, professional management and market rate rents improved the bottom line more than family discounts ever did. Victoria's confirmed for Monday, Maya reported. Marcus too. Even James, once his SEC interviews are done. I looked out over my city, remembering the quiet girl they'd underestimated. The one who'd built an empire while they weren't looking. Now they wanted to learn her methods, understand her success, follow her lead. Send them all building passes, I instructed. But coded for basic access only. They need to earn the rest. The sun set over Manhattan, glinting off buildings I owned, illuminating an empire built on patience, observation, and the power of being underestimated. My family was finally ready to learn.